Hello, welcome to the June 5th, 2026 Club Cubase livestream. My name is Greg Undo and I'm the host of the livestream today. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you can simply ask questions in the live chat field, or questions can be submitted in advance by emailing clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, realize that my ability to answer questions in a real-time manner may soon not be possible with the number of questions, but we will go through all the questions chronologically as asked in order. So if you don't get an immediate response to your question, if we could avoid repeating the same questions, that would be appreciated. It just kind of slows down the whole process. We should have an index of all of the topics that are discussed in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field several hours after. It may be a little later tonight or early tomorrow morning. It's my son's last day of school, so we're going to take him out for a celebration dinner. And if you wanted to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, you could go to cubaseindex.com. And we want to thank Jan from Stockholm for creating that site where you can search through 2,000 hours and over 44,000 topics that have been discussed. You could just do a search and link directly to that moment in the video. We have two people that serve as moderators, Jazz Dude and Agent K. They're not Steinberg employees. They do it to make it a better community experience. We extend our thanks to them. We'll also express extra gratitude to Jazz Dude for his work with the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord. It's a wonderful resource of information, downloads, links, tutorials, articles that are beneficial for the Steinberg community. Once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work with Yamaha Corporation of America, and I primarily focus on Steinberg products in the United States. And I'm the host today. I'm presenting from just outside of Washington, D.C. in the United States in Alexandria, Virginia. So if you are on the live stream, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. And with that, we will go ahead and begin. All right, you see Jazz Dude sharing a link about Loop Mash FX. So if people want to see that, we could incorporate that in. If we have time afterwards, we can show that plugin. It's always a lot of fun. All right, so you see from Fox Andrew just says, "Hi Greg, everyone. I'm posting my question a little early, so I probably won't make the live stream later. Hope you get to see it, and thanks for the answer. Great answer." It says, "I'm optimizing my Iconica template for my laptop, low spec, performance-wise. Any advantage to using one Halion 7 full versus Halion Sonic, and two multi-timbral instances versus one Halion per instrument?" So I think if you run it in Halion 7 or Halion Sonic, that the performance would be identical between the two. So I don't think there's any significant changes there. Where you can run into different performance optimizations, especially with a lower performance, a low spec computer, would be, and you ask about multi-timbral instances versus one Halion per instrument. So I would probably do one Halion per instrument because that could automatically scale across multiple CPU cores. So that's what I would probably do, and you could disable particular instruments. And if you're working on a template, I did update, and I sent it to Jazz. I'm not sure, I haven't looked on the Discord to see if it's been posted. But we had requests last live stream. I kind of redid the templates for we have a symphonic template. So if I come over here and if we go to a new project and we look at the factory templates, we can see a symphonic, clear my throat, just a symphonic orchestra, and this would work with Iconica Sketch. Someone had requested to do that template for Iconica Opus, which we did. And then I think John Barry on the last live stream asked if I went through and did all of the attack compensation. So I did that. I think most of Wednesday I worked on it. So when I come over here, So now so if you have this particular project and if you want to email me, I believe it's probably on the Discord as well, but I'm happy to share this. So now when we go to activate this, so this isn't necessarily where the different tracks are automatically, disabled, but when we come over, one of the things that we added for this was when we go into, let's say, the expression maps, that for each of the articulations, the attack compensation is set up so that as you kind of work, all the articulations will be on time for you as you change. So check out to see if that's available on the downloads. And that's also, there's a Iconica Sketch version and an Iconica Opus version of that. So, but that may be a good place to kind of start off with the template. All right, and I know Jazz Dude has other templates. Okay. Okay, so we see Jazz Dude kind of sharing other templates that are available for Andrew Fox to download. Okay. We see that Andrew Fox will share his template with the community. Okay. But yeah, so I figured out all the track delays for the basic for the instruments in the template, so you don't have to do that. All right. All right, so we see Klaus Olsen joining from Malmo, Sweden. Tim K joining from Zeist in the Netherlands. His cat Buddy is waving a paw hello to my cat Steven, Stella, Mark Raven's dog, and other pets that are nearby. All right, so we have Adam Langford checking in from a small village in Bedfordshire, UK. All right, so we have Benny from Sweden, Uno Memento from Finland. All right, we see Fly V, Vince joining from Winnipeg, Canada. All right, Adam Langford says, question for Greg, are there any significant changes in the latest patch where Cubase I/we should be aware of? So one of the, there's a lot of maintenance fix stuff going on. So one of the things that was kind of annoying to me is you couldn't, like when you went to the right mouse click, you couldn't necessarily change do different tools by clicking on the left mouse button. That's been restored. And also support for Celemony Tonalic. So and we could go over that just a little bit. So we could have kind of Tonalic support inside of Cubase. So it's pretty exciting. So those are the main things, and a bunch of little maintenance issues. All right, so we see Fly V just saying hi to Jazz Dude and myself. All right, we have Michael Teams joining from Weatherford, Texas. So we have Tim Weinheimer, who's also asking what was in the last update for Cubase. All right, so let's say we want to take a look. One of the new things, and you get a Tonalic, I think Essential or Tonalic Elements. I think it's Tonalic Essential now with your Cubase 1503. So let's take a look. And this is from Celemony. It's something that they had announced at the NAMM show in January. So we'll take a quick look. So we actually will just have a Tonalic tab in a right zone. Let me clear my throat again. All right, so let's say we want to search for instruments. So these are kind of actual like session musicians. So let's say we want to come over here. I'm looking for maybe a rock performance, and we can, just like we're previewing loops, we could come over here and we could say, okay, this is Kenny Aronoff, obviously a great drummer. So I could preview the particular samples here. So if I click on, let me make sure I have my audio set up. Okay, so now let's say I want to, so let's go over and say, okay, we have like a basic drum pattern. Now this isn't necessarily kind of audio or MIDI. It's kind of like a hybrid, so it's going to be a recording that's kind of been analyzed with kind of Salomone's DNA technology. So I want to come over now, let's say, okay, I want to search for a bass part. So I want a fretted bass. Let's do maybe a country, and we should be able to. Doesn't want to preview. Let me adjust my preview volume. Let me just. All right, so you should be able to preview. Let me just see if I. All right, so these will obviously be kind of tempo sync. Let me just see if I do a new project and do it in 24-bit, if that makes a difference for the preview. So, sorry, just got this downloaded for my Mac. Let me just. All right, so once we have kind of like, let's say, you can preview kind of the different aspects here. And as we say, okay, I want, let's say, an R&B drums. I'm not sure why the preview isn't working now, but let's say if we have, and now if we wanted to go to like a bass part, we can just come over here and say, okay, we want to, so you could kind of just search by musician. So let's say, okay, now I want to do bass. So let's say I want more electric bass as we kind of come over here. And as we kind of make copies of this, we can. Now, what's cool about this is this will automatically work in conjunction with the chord track. So when I come over, let's just put in like a chord progression here. Okay, so I want this in G. So we'll go to E minor. Okay, so let's say we have now our chord progression here. So I want to copy this chord progression a couple of times. We'll duplicate it. Okay, so now like the pitched audio material. So let's come over, let's just add maybe a guitar part. So let's see if I have the chords now. So it could suggest parts that go along with this. So now when I come over here, we can say, okay, I want to do guitar, and maybe I want it to be more like of a pad sound. So let's say I want to now come over here to the bass line, and I want to change one of the bass parts. So when we double click on this, we can now just come directly over here, and we could choose different variations as well as endings. So let's say, okay, I want to just drop a different pattern in here. I could drop it right over top. So let's come over to one of the guitar parts here. So when I select a guitar part, we could just say, okay, I want to do a transition. So I want to put another transition here. So we're going to have two transitions on this guitar part. So next measure. And then if we wanted to add more ambience or drive to the guitar part. So let's say on this instance, we could also just kind of click here and actually edit kind of the musical part. So if I say, okay, let's just. So we could just kind of take the individual components of this and be able to. So let's say, okay, I want to take this particular note and be able to adjust kind of the pitch or be able to kind of edit the musical phrase. And of course, if I change my tempo, all these will so you have kind of the Tonalic Essential, but if you want to go through kind of different musicians, so you have Tim Pierce, so you could just kind of scroll through and say, okay, I want Busy Hand, so let's come over here, drop this in. So different percussion. And now when we go to mix, again, everything would just show up here. So you can think of this as kind of like different session musicians. So I want my guitars panned. So it's kind of like audio loops of, you know, you think of it as kind of being a nice blend of, you know, having the realism of an audio loop, but the flexibility of editing in the MIDI domain as well. So again, you can just kind of come right over here, just change individual notes around. So if you haven't kind of played around with, you know, so if you say, okay, I just want to take this particular element, we could move the notes. So this time the guitar would be higher than the electric guitar. So it kind of gives you the realism of an audio performance by a great session musician. It's been captured with the flexibility of being able to edit it in the MIDI domain and have it automatically follow the chord track. So check out, it's in your, you'll see a voucher in your My Steinberg account if you have Cubase Artist and Cubase Pro and Nuendo 1503. So definitely kind of check out the Tonalic. So you get the essentials, and then you could pay to get more musicians as you go along. So check that out. It's a lot of fun. Okay. All right, so we see John Costigan joining from Kenosha, Wisconsin. All right, so we have Beverly Beatty joining from Vancouver. He's requesting more cowbell. So all right, so Flyv is just asking, what is loop mash? All right, so loop mash was originally an instrument, and then it's now kind of migrated to a plugin. So let's say I want to take this particular project, you'll see it under Other, and you'll see Loop Mash FX. So as we're kind of playing this, let's say I wanted to do, it's usually kind of probably more tuned for electronic music, but just to give you an idea. So, and you could trigger all these from a MIDI keyboard. So if you want to capture just a section and let go. So if you want to do like quick chops, you could just so if you want to do kind of like DJ style effects, stutters and drops, Loop Mash FX is a great plugin to work with. All right, so we see Soul Sound Official, wishing everyone happy Friday. All right, John Costigan's received 1 gallon of pumpkin spice ice cream. Can't do that at the start of summer. It seems wrong. All right, that's such an October flavor. Back to school, and school's ending, so. Okay, reading through comments. All right, so we see all right, so we see John Barry just says, hi Greg, cheers for the attack compensation work on the Opus template. Yeah, so took a little while to get it all right, and there's some charts online which are Don't have necessarily all of them, but yeah, let me know how it works out for you, John. All right. You see Mark Rabin on. Everyone give a big woof to Stella. All right. Beverly Beatties received 1 gallon of Millennium Cowbell Crunch ice cream. And Memento's giving a big woof to Stella. So it says John Koskin, hello Greg, I'm having difficulty making a template for Iconica Sketch for Cubase 14. Where in the Discord can I find one that will fit the bill? So try, if you just come over here to, and Jazz Dude, probably, I think he saw that he's posting ones that I just sent him with all the attack compensation and folder with group tracks. But you could always start with, if you come over to like the factory presets, and it may look a little different, you'll see one that's just symphonic orchestra. So when you come over here, you could create, and this will get you started with your symphonic orchestra template. So as you open it up, you'll have like your different string section, woodwinds, brass, and percussion all in one template. So there's one that comes with Cubase, but you could also see if Jazz Dude, I think, is posting it now with all of the attack compensation. And instead of the groups being separate, I turned it into folder groups. So let me know if you have problems finding that. All right, so we have Jan Olofdahl says my Cubase 15 Pro is freezing when I open up. I don't know, because it's not every time as it happens. I have Apollo sound card, latency set to 2040 when it happens. So check to see if it's like a plugin. One of the things that you could do when you're opening up Cubase, I'll just open up Cubase 14 here, is I will just open up and I'm going to hold down Alt-Control-Shift right after starting the program, or Command-Option-Shift depending on your operating system. So if you do this, I'm going to open it up. We'll get, do you want to disable the program preferences? And you could also deactivate third-party plugins, but try to disable the program preferences and see if it starts. So it could be just or a plugin that's corrupting the program from starting. So see if doing that. So again, hold down Alt-Control-Shift or Command-Option-Shift, and at that point should be able to start it without the particular without the preferences, and see if that makes a difference for you. All right, so we see Roland Stuff sending greetings from Sussex in the UK. All right, Beverly Beatty's refusing the waffle cone for her ice cream. All right, just going to use an upside down cowbell and a spoon. All right, so we see Jazz Dude has both the new templates ready to download in Discord. Thank you for putting that up. Yeah, Mark Rabin is also mentioning on startup, see if, like when you start up, if you hit Alt-Tab or Command-Tab, if there's another program or a window that's opening in the background, maybe a plugin window. Sometimes when third-party plugins are initializing, it'll check for the license of the plugins and give you a warning. So it could be maybe obscured behind the Cubase splash screen. All right, so we see Roland Stop says, hi Greg, if I punch in a correction to an existing vocal track that I've already tidied up with Very Audio, and then I bounce the track, will the previous Very Audio adjustments be lost? Let's take a look and see if we'll find out. So I'm going to route this to a group and duplicate this track here and then route this to a group. I guess I don't need to do that. All right, so what I want to do is let's come over here. Let's do very audio editing. All right, and I'm going to make it just a new track version. Or let me duplicate that track version. All right, so we have our very audio. I'm going to set the input for this track to be our vocal pass. So we're going to have this track. Do you recall the day? And I'm going to do just a quick punch in. Okay, so I'm going to punch in and punch out on this. So we're feeding this track into the group and the output of the group to the inputs. So we're going to just punch in. That was a long, long time ago. That was... Okay, so... Do you recall the day we first met? That was a long, long time ago. Okay, I'm just going to arm this track, sorry. Do you recall the day we first met? That was a long, long time ago. That... Okay. So I still have my underlying very audio here, and then this section that I just punched in, I may just have to do just a very audio editing on this. So say if I come here, we'll edit the very audio, and now so it doesn't affect the underlying track where the very audio already existed. It's just where we did the punch in, we could just do the very audio there on top. So in essence, this track is sitting on top of that file. So we would just do very audio on this track. So it doesn't negate all the very audio editing changes, but you may just have to apply the very audio editing on the punched in segment. So let me know if that makes sense. Rolling stuff. All right. All right, great to see Sable Winters on, saying hi to a bunch of attendees. All right, so we see Alessandro says, sorry if I'm late to the party. Is this going to be in Cubase 16? So I'm not sure like what this is. So if it's going to be Tonalic, so that will, it's already in 1503. But let me know if I'm misunderstanding. Everyone's happy when Sable's on. Uno Memento wants people to whack the like button. All right, so we have the bang sounds good. Saying hello to everyone and myself. Okay, so we see Sable Winter says, I saw the latest video on Shimmer. Where is it located to use it? Okay, so I'll just open up If you're not familiar with the Shimmer plugin, so let's come over. Just open up a different project here. So Shimmer is like a great reverb effect, so you'd see it under the reverb algorithm. Okay, so I'm just going to put it on the acoustic guitar in this track. Do you recall? All right, so I'm going to make this into stereo track. So let's come over here and I'll just put it, so we'll see it under reverb and you'll see Shimmer. So Shimmer, what you could do is kind of just have the Shimmer reverb be up an octave. So it's almost like a pitch shift. You could have the reverb down, pitch shift down an octave, often by default. So kind of in context of a whole song. Do you recall the day we first met? That was a long, long time ago. So now that we had the Shimmer on. Waiting on our yellow coach to ferry us home. You looked my way and your heart shone through. It caught my. So just like a little bit of Shimmer can make something sound like from a demo to kind of a production. So again, just a if you wanted to filter, like, get less the high frequencies. So if you want to limit the frequency range of the Shimmer effect. Love with you, just like a long, long time ago. So great plugin. So people would often spend $100 to get a Shimmer reverb plugin. Now you just use one that's built into Cubase. So again, look under category reverb and you'll see Shimmer listed there. Okay, so we see Jazzy posted the link for Tonalic, and everyone check your My Steinberg account. And we see from Adam Langford, just says such a shame that the full Tonalic is a subscription rather than an outright purchase. It has a lot of potential. I think probably how you could continue maybe to get such such session players of notoriety. But yeah, it's their business model choice. All right, so we see Jazz Dude says he automated loop mash effects with modulators, so no pushing the key needed. Free template in Discord. Very clever of you. All right, we have Balsa checking in from Montenegro. All right, we have Braxel joining, saying hi to everyone. And he's received 1 gallon of fresh Texas peach ice cream. Braxel's just checking how his fellow Texan, Michael Teams, is doing. All right, we have Brian Sawyer sending greetings from Yuma, Arizona. All right, Alessandro has whacked the like button, so that's great. Thanks. All right, so we see Michael Teams just wishing my family and myself 1 gallon of chocolate haystacks ice cream. Think it's very generous. All right. All right, so we see from Track Quest Music says, I'm sorry, I still have trouble understanding how to save the original recorded track file and hold it untouched, then copy it to do effects edits, then still have access to the original file. Okay, so let's say if you want to do like, a bunch of edits, but to return to the existing track. All right, so you want to save the original track file and hold it untouched, then copy it to do effects and still have access to the original file. So if it's for edits, what I would do is maybe just come over here. So let's say we have a guitar, and I would duplicate a track version, right? And then we could just give this track version a name. So we'll say edits. So now I can come over here and do all sorts of edits. I want to make this louder. Let's delete this section. I want to move this over, copy it, and then let's repeat that a few times. I want to change the color of this event. So now you're like, oh, everything I did was stupid. I could just simply go right back to my original without affecting anything like that. So you could also, and if you wanted to just right click, if you're doing like a lot of different effects, you can save kind of like your track settings as a preset if you wanted to. But if you wanted to work with different effects, one of the things that you could do if you come over here, like if it's for your inserts, so let's say if we come over here, so we could, just simply save an effects chain. So we'll say, okay, June 5th, 1. Okay. And let's say I do completely different effects. Again, I could right click here. Let's save as effects chain preset. June 5th, 2. And then we'll hit OK. So let's say I totally have come over here and I want to go back. You could right click here. Let's load an effects chain preset. And then we could say, okay, I want to go to my first one. I could right click. And then we could also just say, okay, let's load up the second one. And if you wanted to have these stored here, you can say, okay, let's go to my user presets. I want to go to effects chain presets. And then on the selected track, I could just say, okay, I just want to go to June 5th, or just drag that track preset over here, and then all the effects and can be recalled for you as well. All right, so Braxel says, why would I whack the like button and break my mouse? I did click it though, so as long as you clicked it. Yeah. All right. See, Rolling Stuff just says, thanks for testing a very audio with a punch-in, punch-out correction, Greg. I was actually wondering whether the action of bouncing it to a single track would upset my original very audio correction. So if you bounce it to a new track, the very audio settings are going to be applied to the track, but at that point, it's the very audio changes would be kind of rendered in. And then if you wanted to do very audio changes, since it's a different audio file, you'd do the analysis and then do the changes. So once you render the file, the very audio is going to be kind of baked in, so that if you wanted to do further very audio editing after bouncing a track, you just would basically be starting the whole process again, because it is a different, separate, distinct audio file. All right, so Alessandro says, well, Tonalic extend to non-session musicians, but also electronic producers, like having FM Neurobass playing for your track, for example. So probably not a great way. I'm probably not the best person to ask. So currently, all the content I've seen is kind of more like real musicians for drums, bass, guitar, and percussion. I may not have all the libraries, but we'll see. I think a lot of times, I can't really speak for Salamone. My guess is that, that it's kind of unique in that, it's pretty easy to work with like an FM, Neurobass playing in MIDI and with a lot of virtual instruments, but kind of getting the subtle nuances of kind of a professional studio musician may be harder to achieve. But, you could reach out to Salamone. I shouldn't really speak for them. Not sure what their product development is. All right, so John Barry VU says, hi, Greg, in expression maps, why does it not show sustain in the group? Cheers. All right, so a lot of times, let's say if we are looking at an expression map here, if it's the default, so let me just come over here and I'll make a new, let me go, sorry, wrong project. So if the sustain is the default, so that will kind of be there when no expression map is shown. So let's say if I come over here, we'll just solo this cello part. All right, so let's say we go to the group here. So even if we look at the expression map here, we can see that the it's probably not trills would be default. But if sustain is the default, let me just come over here. I'll just add that when there is no expression map, so let's say if we're playing along here, so when we do an expression map, if there is no expression data, so it will just default to the sustain. So this way you don't, if it's always going to be kind of going back to the sustain, when we select notes, we can come over here. Let me just see if I could recreate. All right, let me just make the expression map one more time from scratch just to show. Okay, so we have sustain by default here, which is a lot of the library. So it's going to be So now when I come over here, we can say, okay, I want this to be staccato. So let's take, so let's say I want these here to be staccato. So as we do this, okay. All right, so let's say, okay, I want to put in tremolo here. We'll do legato starting here. So if there's no like, so let's say, okay, I want to put in pizzicato on this particular phrase. So now when I want to come here, we could just say, okay, I will delete this, and often that will just go directly to sustain when there's no. So if we look here as we put in, so the default value, since it's probably what you're constantly going back to, say, okay, we go to spiccato. So we see that indicated here in the groups. But when I erase this, it goes directly to the default value of sustain. So let me know if that makes sense. That way you don't always have to, if you're just the default value and you're just kind of changing a couple of notes, you don't have to always go back and write the default expression into the particular files. All right, so we see Gerald Ely joining from California, 73 degrees Fahrenheit and lots of errands today. But he stopped in to say hi and hit the like button. Have a great stream, Cubasers. All right, we hope you're able to get in some golf with the nice weather. All right, so we see from Sable, just says, thanks, Greg. That was a beautiful difference on the acoustic guitar. All right, so we see Soren joining from Sweden. Adam Langford says that Shimmer demo is superb. Love that sound. Yeah, it's a very kind of special, unique sound with Shimmer reverbs. Once you use it, you just can't use it on every track. You're kind of tempted to, but it's like, in the late 80s when when people, were naming, if you had a synthesizer and you would kind of, watch a TV jingle or a show and it's like, oh, D50. Oh, that's Fantasia, or that's Staccato Heaven, or it's this M1 patch. Oh, they did a film score preset from the M1, so you don't want to have it so recognizable all the time, but it is a great sound. All right, so we see from Soul Sound Official, says when using Very Audio in full screen or in the bottom tabs, I'm using 15 Pro. When I tune the vocal, it's not synced to the project when playing. The notes are not matching the playhead. Thanks. All right, so let me just do a quick project here. I haven't run into that. I'll do a different project than what we're listening to before. Okay, so let's say we're doing this.
What did you say?
All right, so let's say I'm doing Very Audio here.
You wished it all away.
Alright, so now I'm going to go to full screen.
I was your everything. Now I'm uninvited. I'm on the outside looking in.
So let's say if I just go to play this.
You put the close sign up on your heart.
And I go back.
All the lights went out and it got dark. Where do I go from here?
So as we just kind of come over.
Go from here.
So it seems like it's in sync when I kind of go back and forth.
Where do I go from here? Where do I go from here?
You know, make sure that you have like the follow the auto scroll turned on. So now it's not going to update, but if I have the auto scroll icon turned on there, I'll go back to the lower screen. So that won't update. But once that is turned on, it seems to. So that seems to be tracking along. Let me know if I'm doing something differently than you are, Soul Sound Official. All right, great to see Tim Weinheimer on. I think I said that earlier, so saying hi to Memento. All right, so we see from John Barry, just says, hi Greg, the harp in my iconic Opus has gotten broken ORTF microphones, no output. All right, so let's just open. So say maybe there wasn't. I'm not sure if there is. Let's see if the others. Maybe it wasn't sampled with those microphones. Let me just. So maybe it just didn't use those, maybe just used a close in the tree mics for that. Let me just try it different. Okay, so let's say if I just play. So maybe the, maybe just the harp didn't use those channels when they did the sampling for it. I can see if I could find out for you. but it seems like, so it might have been just the close mic and I can see if I can clarify that, John. I'll make a note of it when I do the index. All right, St. Robert says, Greg, I have problems with the new Windows driver policy blocking a USB MIDI device. I narrowed it down to my CC121. When I turn on, Windows keeps warning me that the driver is blocked. So I think that there was a new download that was released for that. So I run my CC121 without any issues on Windows 11 with the latest Windows MIDI services. But I think I think I saw something on maybe the Steinberg forums. Not sure if you saw this in the forums. But there is I think that there is one thread. Okay, so if you come over here, the USB MIDI driver version 3.1.5 for Windows. So look for that, and I just got the link here, and I could put that link in the chat. So we can see that helped other people. So let me just see if I could share that. But I'll leave this up for just a minute. I guess on this computer I'm on, I don't have the chat open. But see if you just come over here, then that should do the trick for your CC121. Sorry, my chat field jumped. All right. So we see from Rick from Bratman Studio says the updated 1203 and Virtual Synth H7, Arteria, etc. showed volume on meters but no output. It says upgrade disconnected my output 1 and 2 to my 4i4. Yeah, check just to, maybe, let me know if it's still not functioning when you go to the control room, if this was disconnected in your control room. So let's say if I come here, I have my monitors. So let me know if that is connected. Maybe. All right, so you see Roland Stubb says, thanks for explaining how Very Audio is affected or not affected by bouncing a track. You get it now. Yeah, so it kind of sees it as a separate audio file. See Sable Winters saying that the shimmer was stunning sounding. All right, so we have Razel Zamini joining from Denmark. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see from John Barry, just says, thanks for clarifying default behavior sustain expression maps and therefore not needed in a group. Yeah, I think once you kind of play around with it, it's like, oh, it kind of makes sense. All right, Brian the Bear says we need to be mashing the like button. All right, so we see from Tim K says, I'm cracking up over here about the temptation to use shimmer for everything. I actually like to use an effect until the shine wears off so I can arrive at happiness without appearing obsessed. That's always good. All right, so you see from John Barry says, following on, so if articulations use directions, do you use reset in order to return to default? So yeah, that's what you do. Let's take a look at it. All right, so let's say I have this, and let's say if I come over here, then you go back to reset, and we can see that the reset takes that directly back to default. I'll make this a little larger so we could all see it. So all you have to do, again, is just kind of with the pencil tool, say, okay, I want to click here, and then we see the little drop-down name, reset, and then you see that immediately goes back to default. So if I want to put it back in here or switch it to spiccato, we can now just come right over there. And you can see it always reflected directly here as well. All right, so we have Pastoral Apologetics watching from Southeast Texas. It says thrill for the knowledge, demeanor, and hospitality. So thanks for joining us again. Hope you're well. I was in Texas last week and maybe going down to Houston in the fall for some Dorico training. All right, you see Sable just saying Beverly left the Zoom early. She didn't get a chance to meet her. Right, hopefully everyone will be on at the end of June for our Zoom social meetup. It's always a lot of fun to do. All right, so we see a question from Soul Sound Official. Greg, I can't hear the project when I'm in Very Audio. I just can hear the selected audio only. And I used to edit while playing from the project into Very Audio and edit at the same time. Okay, so it's probably going to be... Okay, so let's say if I'm in Very Audio here, make sure that you don't have the editor, the solo in the editor selected. Now I can hear everything, but if this is turned on, I only hear what's in this particular editor.
You were the party, the big events. I was your everything. Now I'm uninvited.
So just check that setting right there.
I'm on the outside looking in. You put the close sign up on your heart. All the lights.
So check to see if you don't see that icon, you could probably just right click. If you go to the settings here, so make sure that that's not turned on there. All right, so we see Tim K just saying the Pogues did a great cover of Honky Tonk Women, which opens with a cowbell. Worth a listen if you haven't. Beverly, he's a cowbell fan. All right, so we see Soul Sound Official says a pure cloudy Canadian day today. Fun. Cubase is going to camping. All right. We see Jazz Dude post a link to the current sales promotion that Steinberg is doing. I believe it's 40% off of Wavelab. So if you want to experiment with Wavelab demastering, it's a great time to kind of jump in. All right, so you see John Barry just says, cheers, Greg. It just happened to be setting up a mix while using only ORTF and close mics, and that was the only one that had no output. Really enjoying that aspect of Opus. Yeah, I think it's cool. Could have been that just didn't take advantage of that. All right, so Beverly Beatty just asked a great question. I have an Akai MPK controller. When I play from the keyboard, notes works perfectly, but there are controllers such as stop, play, record. The controllers stop, play don't work now. Says not sure what happened, but forward, backward, stop, play, record not working, but I can see MIDI info when I press the buttons. All right, so generally most of the MIDI controllers like stop, play, the transports are actually just sending MIDI notes. And we can think of the MIDI note as just a message. Think of it like a language. And it's the language that controls different aspects of the program. So there isn't a standard start, stop, MIDI message. It's just firing off a MIDI note. And that note is then mapped somehow to control functions and parameters in the software. So when you do that, if you're utilizing like a MIDI remote, check your MIDI remote settings. So let's say if I go to my Korg Nano control, I can just, come right over here and I could assign, so if you're using a MIDI remote, you could, right click on the parameters to say, okay, I want to go to stop. I can say MIDI remote, pick for mapping, and then I hit the stop button. And I could just assign that particular, so if I want to come over here, I could MIDI remote pick up and then assign that to particular buttons. So let's say, okay, I'm now in my Nano control. So now when I hit this, we can now apply that mapping to that function. So generally that's not automatically done. So some controllers, if you're using the MIDI remote, that's probably a good way to do it. So make sure your MIDI remote is set up correctly. Some controllers for the transports may utilize something like a Mackie control, which is kind of like a language protocol that says this MIDI message is going to do play, this MIDI note is going to do stop. So that's a commonly used protocol. So if you go to your studio setup, make sure that if it's utilizing Mackie control or generic, that the MIDI mappings, the MIDI ports are set correctly here. And if it's generic, you can say, okay, this MIDI note message is controlling, the transport for start, stop. So we could just say, okay, when I come over here to transport, this MIDI note message is now, saying start, stop. So we could just kind of come over here and remap all of the MIDI notes to do functions in the program. But by default, they don't do the MIDI notes, so you set it up using a MIDI remote or using kind of running the controller as a Mackie control. And sometimes in the controller, you may go into a mode that says, okay, this is a Mackie control, or this is not a Mackie control, and we're kind of could remap it for a MIDI remote script inside of Cubase. All right, so we have Harshit Kumar just saying hello. Thanks for joining us. All right, so you see that Summer is showing up for Michael Teams in Texas, and he's granting 1 gallon of lemon meringue ice cream. Lemon meringue pie ice cream for Rick and his family. All right, so we see Michael Teams says, Greg going to Houston. I might make the trek down there for a hangout. I'll let you know if I'm down there or if I'm in Dallas for more than like 8 hours. So hopefully I may be doing some more traveling coming up after next month. All right, so we see just kind of a further comment. Okay, so we see from Beverly, or Soul Sound Official to Beverly, says he might just be missing the script. Maybe it's not there no more or something. Now, one thing that you can make sure of is sometimes, the controller, if you have a remote control script, if we go to the studio setup, and if it's kind of set up as a generic remote or a Mackie control, if you see the Akai MPK controller listed here, try to turn this to not connected if you're utilizing a script. If a Mackie control or generic remote is set for those particular MIDI ports, that can hijack the MIDI signal for those functions going into the actual controller for the MIDI remote. So you want to make sure that those messages are getting into the MIDI remote. All right, so we see from Adam Langford, what is that Andrea Vox track you are using? Is that a released piece? It's lovely. So it's so sometimes I tend not to use released material because I don't want to get a copyright infringement notice for the live stream. So this is a song composed by one of the songwriters, is a longtime friend of mine who often will let me, very generously will let me use his songs that don't get picked up. So it's a beautiful piece. I agree with you. It's a great performance. So my friend Vince Melamed, and he's been like a guest. I think he was our first guest on the Zoom social that we had. Vince is kind of a noted songwriter. He's had like huge hits with Trisha Yearwood and lots of other people. He's kind of a journeyman sideman keyboard player. He toured with the Eagles back in the day, so you could listen to him on the Eagles live record from 1980. He's played with Bob Dylan, Dan Fogelberg, Roseanne Cash. So a whole kind of slew of Jimmy Buffett. He was in, Jimmy Buffett's band for like a decade. So just a just an amazing individual, great songwriter. So it's a piece he wrote. I think he wrote it with the singer Andrea. I don't know her last name. I believe she's Canadian. I could be mistaken. But it was a collaboration that they did, and it did get picked up for a song. So Vince will kind of give me like his demos that I could use for demonstration purposes. It's very kind to do that. But yeah, it's a wonderful. He always writes wonderful songs. And our song that he wrote that's very popular in the live streams is called Beatles or Stones. And one of the other ones that I use is the Be Someone. That's another one he wrote, but he's a very successful songwriter. So, but I don't think that was actually released as a track. So. All right, so I think Jazz Dude was kind enough to share the driver link for the CC121 driver. Thank you for doing that, Jazz Dude. I always monitor the comments on a different computer, so I don't have to constantly switch back and forth. All right, and Jazz Dude's also shared a link for the MIDI remote scripts that are shared by users. All right, so we see from Adam Langford, just says many thanks for the track info, really interesting. Shame it wasn't released. And you wonder, hanging around with a lot of Nashville songwriters, like how many amazing songs are just sitting on someone's hard drive that didn't get released or never got recorded beyond like a demo sketch. So it's always interesting. Some amazing songs that just don't get released. So. All right. Okay, see Jazz Dude has shared the MPK links for Beverly. All right, let me go to another question that was asked. So we had a question that was asked, how come when I add particular plugins in my MIDI, in my mixer, they show up and they're almost turned off and the plugin interface doesn't pop up and I can't edit the particular plugins? Okay, so probably what's going on is if we come over here to our mixer and let's go to like our full screen mixer and I go to add an insert on a particular track, you may notice that it will show up to look something. So let's say add the vocal chain here. All right, so maybe let me just make sure. So if we have like the particular, so let's say I have this particular track selected and I go to add a plugin. All right, we can see that the vocal chain plugin is not turned on. So again, I'll come over here. Let's add another insert. So I'm going to select this track and I'm going to put the vocal chain on. Now when that track is selected, that vocal chain will be grayed out, and that's because the delay, constrained delay compensation is enabled. So when this is turned off, and what this is doing is as we add plugins that have high latency into the system, it could be difficult to practically record without a lot of additional latency that's heard. So if you wanted to, just on your particular track, if this is turned on, that when we add a plugin, this plugin will be bypassed because this particular plugin has a high latency. If I go to select a different track, that plugin will become enabled. But when we so for the track that you're recording onto, make sure that the plugin delay compensation isn't turned on. And that's going to be, again, in the lower left-hand corner here of the project window. So I'll come right over here, and we can see now that that particular plugin is turned off. Now, when I go to add a plugin, a high latency plugin such as the vocal chain, it will automatically show up and be active. But when this plugin, when I come over here and I have this track selected and I add a high latency plugin, let's say for my audio, I will just come right over here, go to the vocal chain. That's orange. So this plugin is now bypassed because the latency can be too high. So that's probably why. So just simply turn off the plugin delay compensation in the lower left-hand corner, and that will probably resolve the issue. Okay, so we see from Soul Sound Official, Greg, what is the best way to widen a 2-track beat around the vocal? I have vocals in a 2-track beat and a rough super wide sound, the vocal, my mix cleaner, but more center. Is it with the Imager plugin? All right, so let's say if I wanted to, let's say I'll just make a quick, let's do a new project here. Okay, so let's say I want to put in a quick bass part here. All right, let's say we'll do key of E. Here. All right, so let's say now we want a vocal to kind of sit in the middle of that. I will come over. Let's see if I could just grab, let me just duplicate this track here, and we'll do make this polyphonic. All right, so we want a vocal to kind of sit in the middle of that. So let's say I want to send all of these to a group. Let's move it to just a group folder, and we'll just say beat. All right, so one of the ones I would do is just get to the Imager plugin. And often where the vocal is going to be sitting, I could just over here, so we get to solo. So I want to make this width and say my low end width and maybe my high end width, but maybe my mid range more narrow. So if we come over here, let me just throw a vocal in here. I'll just put a project root key. Okay, so let's go ahead and just put in
Gave you control, gave you control. Ooh, yeah.
Okay, so let's say got a couple of vocals laid in here. All right, so now. I'd put some effects on this. All right, so let's say I'll just turn off my punch in and punch out. All right, so I'll just throw kind of like a big delay on it.
Gave you control, gave you control. Ooh, yeah. Gave you control.
But now if I want to, so if you add kind of like effects that are stereo based, that can make a big difference in kind of making your vocal pop out. But if we want it again to come over here to kind of like our stereo imaging, we can make these frequencies kind of very mono. See that if I make these frequencies wide,
Gave you control, gave you control. Gave you control.
So I take like the low end here. So the imager is really good because like you could tailor specific frequency ranges to be wider or narrower. So often, like if you want more impact, you could have the actual low frequencies be very narrow and kind of mono to kind of clean up the low end, and have this, but just being able to take, often effect processing can make the vocal kind of stand out from a backing track like that. All right, so we see from Beverly, says, thank you, Greg. Thank you to all my Cubase pals. We got the controls are working, MPK 249. All right, and it's officially working. That's great. Thanks for letting us know. It says it's not been working for 2 months, so thank you all. Just had to ask in the particular, just ask anytime you have questions, and hopefully you don't have to wait 2 months. All right, Eddie on drums says, added German augmented 6. I was thinking more French augmented 6, but yeah. All right. Oh, and for Beverly, I will add just a quick, let's see if I have, I don't think I have the cowbell on, but next time I make a beat, we'll just put it on for you, Beverly. All right, so we see Michael Marshall joining from Somerset in the UK. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see Beverly Beatty says, I tried to imager on my Vox yesterday, and it was impressive. Cubase plugin, going to use it more. All right, so John Barry just says, my track is too slow for techno. Greg is in the house, so I'm... All right, so let's say I'm clever, I can make it.
Gave you control, gave you control.
Yeah, I always thought it was funny when people like would talk about programming songs, and it's like, oh, it's so hard to get it to work at a faster tempo, and get to like as if they were performing all the stuff at a faster tempo and not just sequencing it and adjusting the tempo up. All right, but yeah, I'm just an old white guy from the suburbs in America, so I don't have a good sense of techno and R&B music as much anymore. All right, so we see Del Sur Music. Hello, Greg. How can I set up an Atmos mix and listen from my speakers 914 to a binaural in my headphones and do A/B comparison? Thanks. All right. All right, so I'll just set up a quick from scratch Atmos. Let's see if I can use just different loop here. Okay, so let's say I want to take just speed it up a little bit here. All right, so I want to set this up. Okay, so let's come over here and go to project menu. Let's up our ADM authoring. I'll come here to my setup assistant. You could connect the actual, so if you have, so I don't think that we're going to have 914 support in Cubase, but let's say if you have it set for 714, and we'll add our bed. But if you have Nuendo, so once I'm here, we could do our down mix from like 714 to binaural. So now if I want to listen to it, I'll open up my audio channel here. So if you have headphones on and listen to this will, so I'll automate this change here. All right, so that would be kind of spinning around if you have headphones on. So as we're working on it binaurally, but let's come over here. So once we are in our particular channel, so here I could just switch my down mix from binaural to, let's say, 714. So you could just toggle it right there. Now let's take a look at the control room. Because you may also be able to set up the phones channel. And let's say if we go to the phones channel and the inserts, let me just get rid of some of these. So if we're monitoring this in 5.1, you could try this. I haven't tried it because I don't have 714 or 5.1, but I haven't gotten I don't have it actively connected. But let's say if we're here and we have this for our, so let's say for the renderer. All right, so now we could switch from, so let's say if we switch this to like 714, or 914 if you're in Nuendo. And I think that if we come here to the inserts for the headphones, that we can see the ambi decode. So you may have to, but you could try experimenting with the ambi decoder on the headphone channel, but you could just simply, and that would require a separate bus for the headphones. So, but if you don't have that, you could just go to this plugin, and like when you go to headphones, just switch to binaural. When you're working with your speakers, go to 714 and just kind of toggle back and forth if you want. Okay. So Sable Winter says, Greg, that was cool. Jazz Dude says, vocal chain plus shimmer equals homeopathic doses. So, all right, wonderful to see Tiago joining from Brazil. Thanks for joining us, representing South America for us on the live stream. So it says, thanks, Greg. Question, I want to align the record shift manually. How how can I test that? And is it true that buses outputs don't get delay compensation? So anytime that plugins are instantiated in a, so if I take this, if I add audio tracks, and let's say, these audio tracks, I have plugins on the track. So let's say, okay, I'm going to put like a multi-band compressor, stuff with like some latency on it. And then we go and we send these to a group. And we put this on, so say, okay, put, different plugins with different latencies going on here. So the groups are all delay compensated. The external effects are all delay compensated. So I don't think that you would need to actually, so I don't think there's any need because the outputs, while the outputs may not be delay compensated, the signal going to the outputs is delay compensated. So I want to align the record shift manually. How can I test that? And is it true that the bus's outputs? So, once it is leaving Cubase, and going to a physical output, then if that's going into, whatever path that's going to may have latency. Generally, at that point, most people are saying it to something that doesn't have latency, but there's no, if it is going into like a finalizer, something like that, which may impose latency on an output bus, then, what you could do is I would just record like an audio file. It's just, if it was something where, you could do external effects, if we have that going and it's routed, that output is routed to an external effect, that external effect can be compensated for. So if I come over here to the inserts and we go to like an external plugin, such as, let's say our, we'll say a lexicon, and let's say we're going into a 480, maybe the latency of the lexicon wasn't the best, that we could, if we have the inputs and outputs defined here in the external effects, that we could just simply, come over and measure the delay, and that would automatically be compensated. So worst case scenario is if you're going into something like a whole chain that's not being connected to your audio interface, we could add something along the lines of, okay, let's get to an instrument. Let's do something like percussive, like Groove Agent SE. Okay, so, and what you could do is just to simply have something percussive that comes on, directly on the beat. So let's say you have a note here, send that note out to the path if you need to align the buses and record the signal back in, and then you could just switch your time here from milliseconds. So let's say, okay, you could see kind of exactly where the I'll just do this on a stereo project here. All right, let me just... All right, so let's say we'll take something like that. So we'll put in like a D1. Something kind of just short. All right, so let's quantize that. And we could just copy like every beat like this. So what I would do is send this to an output bus. So let's say if we're just playing this, I will just put one more in. All right, so we're here. We're going to make sure that all of these are quantized. Or I'll actually just set it to seconds here. Okay, so let's say these are all starting at exactly like at 1 second, 2 second, 3 seconds. So we know exactly like where these are going. So let's say if I sent this out and captured the record output, so I'll just kind of simulate this by, let's say I send it to group track, and then I add an audio track here. All right, let's just, okay, and we're going to set this input of this audio track. We get the routing right. All right, and the input, we're going to send it to the group. So now, so if you wanted to now, like once you capture the output, you could see exactly like where this, you know, where, so if we come right over here and within the sample editor, I'll just close the very audio. And we switch our time here to seconds, that you could see exactly. So if this is supposed to be right on, you could just come over here and say, okay, this is going to be and we can say that's going to be looks like 11 samples difference, and you could adjust for that if necessary. But everything inside of Cubase is automatically delay compensated, so I'm not sure if you never need to. All right, you see Jazz sharing a link to the vocal chain, which is an amazing plugin for all your vocal needs. All right, great to see Graham Witcher checking in from Oxford. Let's see, Soul Sound Officials just says, rest in peace to Al Schmidt. Never EQ vocal post-recording, EQing with the mic itself and the mic placement from the sources. The sibilance has been taken care of. Just some compression afterwards. He wasn't a big compression guy as well. So yeah, Miss Al. I always remember one time, I think we sat together at the Tech Awards show in 2005 when I was nominated for Eric Clapton's Crossroads, and I told him my secret to a big like banquet dinner with like 1,000 people was just to order the vegetarian dish because they had to make it special. And then it was, he got the vegetarian dish, which was really awful, at the New York Marriott, and went on stage and told everyone that I gave him a bad strategy for his dinner that night. So, but yeah, Miss Al is a great guy. So we see from Beverly, Greg, regarding binaural, does Cubase have binaural beat frequencies, those types of frequencies that oscillate in stereo headphones and you end up falling asleep? I'm sure you could make something in within, Retrolog or Halion to do that. All right, so we see Delser Music. Is there a key command to switch from 714 to binaural? So I don't think that there's a key command to do it. I may have closed the project, but what you could do, let's say if I come over here, and let's see if it'll allow me to open it up. All right, so let's say if I was going to switch between binaural and stereo, what you could do is, if you come over here, we could say, okay, we could switch between the A and B settings. So we could say apply current settings so we're going to switch to the B setting. So I have stereo, or let's say 714, and now when I come over here, let's go here. We'll go to the little drop down menu, and now we can say switch to A setting. So let's see if that works. Apply current settings to A and B. So we say switch to B. All right, let me just try again see if we get it. All right, so I still have it open here. All right, so this now come over here. So it doesn't look like that is. Yeah, it doesn't look like. So sometimes in plugins you could save different states with the A and B settings. Let me see if that's automatable. Just out of curiosity, we might be able to. May not be. Yeah, it doesn't look like it's automatable. Let me just look. Sometimes you could switch. Yeah, so it doesn't seem like that's automatable, so you might have to just kind of switch manually. I could play around with it, see if I could come up with something over the weekend. All right, so we see Daniela on as Da Vinci Girl. Thanks for joining us. All right, we see that Graham Witchers received 1 gallon of elusive Midnight Ride ice cream. Such a creative flavor, Michael Teams. Well done. All right. All right, so we see John Barry just says, hi again. In Groove Agent Pattern Editor, can you make velocity variation permanent? Okay, let's take a look. Okay, so let's say play this. Okay. Okay, so let's do our velocity variance. I'll just say I'll make every other one loud, soft. So I'm not sure if you have to see if I could. I'll do it on an acoustic agent kit where we could probably hear the hi-hats a little better. Sorry. So you may have to, wonder if you have to drag it in to Cubase to make it permanent. Yeah, so I don't think you could make it permanent inside of Cubase, but inside of Groove Agent. But let me just try dragging this to an event here and see if we just can. I think we could just. So we can see that we have kind of. It looks like it kind of rendered that in as soon as it was copied over. Let's see if we copy it multiple times, if we get different settings. Yeah, so it looks like every time, like if it's dragged in, and we'll just glue all these together so we can see them all at once, that every time that there's a velocity variation, that it's going to be random, that it may just, as it's dragged in, may be random. So once it's kind of in Cubase, but I think every time it's going to just randomize the velocity, the variations in the velocity. So I don't think that there's a way to freeze it. But I think if we go to your velocity variance here, that so just to kind of get that, but I think maybe if you freeze MIDI modifiers, that might freeze it, but I don't think we could do it inside of Groove Agent. Okay. All right, so we see Sean Day says, what a fantastic site. I've been watching now for a few weeks. Cubase 15 Pro, amazing. So we hope you're enjoying the live streams. All right, so we have Sean Days from Harwich, Essex, UK. All right. All right, so we see Del Sur Music. Is there a search function in Cubase to quickly find specific functions instead of going through all menus until I find it? So, there isn't necessarily like kind of a function search in Cubase. If you wanted to look for functions and you wanted to search like where particular aspects may be, if you go to the key commands, so if you just come over here, often you can say quantize, and then you could see what category the quantize settings are in just by searching in the key commands. But there isn't kind of like a global, I want to, quantize drums, or I want to do logical editor, search for that. So, learning kind of the menus, but if you're looking like where stuff is, you can often find it by searching the key commands. So it would be under the edit menu in Cubase. So if you say, okay, I want to cycle, and then you can say, okay, these are all the things related to cycle. So I could have markers. I could go to my preferences for cycle. So this could give you kind of a roadmap to find particular functions. And sometimes if you say velocity variance, that could show up in 13 different spots in the program. So, all right. right, so we see from Daniela, it says that Wilfried's mother passed away, so please pass on our condolences to him. He'll be in my thoughts. It's always incredibly hard to go through. Okay. So we see from Roland stuff, hi again, Greg. Whenever I generate harmony voices, they start out random, non-keyboard, non-key related pitches. I think I remember you once showing us how to get that roughly in key from the start. So generally, like when you do a randomize, when you do like a generate harmonies, it's going to be kind of tied to the chord track, and it's using the chord track as the basis for it. So let's say I have a chord track here in this project. So just let me revert this because I probably destroyed it. Out of respect for my friend Vince. All right, so here I have kind of a chord track.
All away, and I'm left here for 1,000 years and a day.
So let's say I want to do the phrase and a day. So I'm going to select that with my range tool. And we see that this is going to be a C chord going to like an E minor chord. So now that we have the chord tracks, I'm going to come over and we'll go to the audio menu to generate harmony voices. And we'll just do one harmony voice here. So now.
And a day for 1,000 years and a day.
So, and we could just kind of come over here, we'll bring back our harmony down in volume a bit.
1,000 years and a day.
And let's come over here and I could say, okay, let's select this track. We go to our chords and we say, okay, I want it to be a tenor voice instead.
Years and a day.
Or we could do, okay, I want this to be, instead of a tenor, we could do like an alternate alto. So make sure that you have chord tracks and then it knows how to build the harmonies based on the existing chords for you. All right, so see from John Barry says, thanks, Greg. I always do the variation after dragging the Cubase, just checking if I've not missed something in Groove Agent. Yes, I don't think there's a way to fix it. Okay. Okay, so we had another question that was mailed in. Let me go to that. Okay, so question, aligning MIDI notes. Is there a MIDI alignment tool? Overview, I have a track of MIDI. It plays bass and it was mostly quantized, but some notes were manually manipulated, so they are now offbeats. So technically it has its own groove going on that is not quantizable, as it would make that groove different. So with this MIDI track pattern, I'm trying to put another bass sound to my chorus part of my song that follows the usual MIDI pattern, but we'll be playing with different notes for my chorus part. So I need the pattern to align. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look. Let's do a new project here. right, so let's say let me just turn on my pre-record and my click. So let's say I want to record. All right, so let's say I have that for my bass part. And let's say now if I duplicated this, I'll just duplicate track here. And let's say I quantize this to straight eighth notes. So I'll come over here, let's quantize it. Okay, so now these two. If we look at these both in our MIDI editor, we can see that some of these are not going to be quite aligned. I'll just show. Okay, so just opening up like the in-place editor. Okay, so we can see like some of these notes aren't going to be aligned. So let's say this is quantized to eighth notes, and these two parts when we playing. Okay, so what I want to do is we're going to try this. I'm going to I want to match the feel of the lower part to the top part. So I'm going to hit Command-Shift-I. We'll close the in-place editors, or Control-Shift-I. So what we're going to do is to create a quantized preset based on the top here. So I'll just change the color of this so we can differentiate it. All right, so I'm going to open up my quantize panel. Okay. All right, make sure. Okay, so let's go to my quantize panel. And what I'm going to do is just drag this MIDI event into the quantize panel. It's now made a kind of a groove quantize preset. So we'll open up this part here. And what I'm going to do now is select that part, and I'm going to apply the quantize. And now we play both of the parts together. So now what we did basically, so we just take the timing of one of the parts, drag the MIDI event, and we could do this with audio as well. Drag that event over into the quantize. That will make a preset. We could save that preset and then just select another event and hit Q with that preset loaded up. And you could do kind of an alignment for MIDI or like a match quantize. So if you always have particular feels, like, you know, Teddy Riley is well known for his New Jack Swing. It's a very particular feel. So, you know, instead of having to play every single part, he could save it as a quantized preset. And that quantized preset, you can just simply call up and apply to other parts to have kind of equal timing. All right, let's jump back to live questions. All right. See, Jazz Dude shared a link to Alice's Cubase tutorials. All right, so Word2RG says, does the basic MIDI editor provide the option to auto-populate the grid with quarter notes or clone a note to every 16th? All right, so let's come over here. I'll just do a track version here. All right, so let's go to like new. I'll just do new version here. We'll create just a blank. All right, so let's just say I have. All right, so if we switch to like the drum editor, I could come over here and just say, okay, I want to put in like 16th notes. So we could just drag across in the drum editor to do that. So that's a pretty easy way to do it. So let's say my quantize is, let's say, set to, I'm going to do 8th note triplets. So now when I drag in, so I can do 16th notes, let's say I want to do 64th notes here. I want to do, 8th note, 16th note triplets. So we could kind of do polyphonic stuff like that pretty easily. Now, if we wanted to do it in the key editor, I think what we could do, so I'm going to switch this over to our key editor, and if we wanted to put it all onto one particular pitch, I think if we switch our draw tool here to the paintbrush, and let me just hold down one of the modifier keys. So all right, so right now you can say my quantized value is set to 16th notes. So I could say, okay, when I go to C3 with the paintbrush tool, I'm going to hold down the control key. And now I could just enter in, 8th note triplets. If I switch this to, let's say, 32nd notes here, I could just start drawing in, hold down the control key. This will allow us to stay on a single pitch. And now I have 32nd notes. And if I wanted to do quarter notes on a different pitch, I could select my different rhythmic value. Again, switch. You'll have one of the drawing tools. So if you just kind of come over here, you can select the drawing tool, then click the left mouse button, go to the paint, and now hold down control. Now as I draw in, we will now just have quarter notes. So let me know if that will work for you. So you can set your quantized value here. So say, okay, I want to do 8th note triplets on this beat starting at beat 2. You could just drag across. Or if you wanted to randomly, if you don't hold down the control or command key, you can just simply, do your 21st century composition like that. I once had to spend a day with the son of Sidney Harman of Harman Kardon fame. Went to hang out with his son, who was kind of messing around with Cubase, and he's probably like 10 years old, and just come over here and he would just kind of draw in notes with the paint tool, kind of do this and see what would happen and what it would sound like in MIDI. So spent an afternoon with him doing that. So fun day. All right. So let me know if that works, but you could just kind of draw in notes with different rhythmic values right there. So again, if you say, okay, now I just want to put in half notes. So now you could just kind of easily add notes of different rhythmic values like so. And there may be, let me see if I remember this one other. So let's save my quantizer value. I haven't done this since maybe Atari days. So let's say I have my cursor at beat 3. And let's put in an 8th note here. So I'm going to select that. See if I can just be like a fill loop function. I haven't done that in 30 some years. Yeah, I'm just looking to edit. All right, so let me put left and right locators here. So let me just select this 1/8 note here. If we go to functions, so there's a repeat, how many times? So you can do that, but let me see if I'll check it out. But yeah, try using the paintbrush tool while holding down the control key. And let me know if that would work for you. All right, so we see Soul Sound Official says I got a recording chain using the CPU instead of the interface. Can you please show how to delay the chain? Say it's 10 milliseconds total with a negative value, not just a monitoring way to print it. So try going to your studio menu, to studio setup, and let's go to the audio system. So there's a record shift here. So it may not be in samples, but you could adjust this to like a negative value. So you could adjust the samples right there. So try see if you could adjust the record shift. So again, go to your studio menu, to studio setup, select audio system, and see if you could adjust that so the value will be in samples, and you could figure that out for milliseconds as well with the sample rate. All right, so we have a question. Any way in Cubase to do 3 exports in one go, a full instrumental, the same instrumental with 2 tracks muted, and then a solo track on its own, or do they have to be 3 separate exports? Okay, so let's say we'll jump back to our song. Let's see if we could do it as like a batch export. All right, let me just... Okay, so let's come over here. So if it's going to be like kind of a stereo audio. Let's say if we come over here to their audio mix down, so we could do kind of different formats. All right, so I think if we set it up, I'll just set up a quick example with the smaller project for time's sake. All right, so let's just try. Okay, so let's say I have bass drums and guitar. So let's say I want to come here. So I'm going to send these to their own folders. So if you have it set up for different folders, I think we could do it. So let's come over here, and I'm going to turn this into a group channel, and let's put our bass to its own group channel. All right. All right, so let's come over here. So we'll call this our guitar group. Okay, and I'm going to add 3 group channels. Just see if we can get this going. So let's add 3 groups. All right, so here we'll call this mix 1. Okay, so if you have this set up as a template, I'm going to go over here to direct routing, and let's go to our groups. So I want my drum group. All right, so we have our drum group folder. I'm going to send this with direct routing. Let's come over here. So I'm going to go to my settings, and we want to make sure that direct routing summing mode is on. So I'm going to send this to mix 1 drums. To drums and bass, and to all. I'm going to send this to, so let's come over here to our bass group, and I want to send this to mix drums and bass and mix all. Okay, so I'll just play this and let's take our guitar group, and we want to just send this to mix all in our case here. Okay, so I'm just gonna check this, my routing here says solo. Okay. Okay. Okay, so now we have our drums coming through here. I want to go to my bass track, and we'll just enable it here. So when I turn my bass on, and I'm going to turn on my guitar group. Okay, so I have kind of the different instruments I want isolated to be set to groups, and I'm going to send these to groups, and these are kind of like pre-master groups, if you will. So now we'll try to export. I'll do just a small section. So we'll come over here. Let's do an export audio mix down. And I want to choose multiple. We'll go to, let's say, our group tracks. And what I want to do is come over here, and we have export cues. So I'm going to come over to my export queue. We're going to add that to the queue. We will give it a name. So we want this to be let's say drums, and we have different naming conventions if you wanted to. So let's come over here to my naming. All right. Okay, so and now we will come over and let's add a second one. And let's add that to the queue. So let's say drums and bass. Here, I'll just remove this from the queue. I'm going to just label this drums and bass. Add that to the queue. And now, so that's going to be just that group. And now I want this to be mix all. We just activate this group here. And once you have this set up in the template, you could save this as presets. So let's go ahead and add that to the queue. Okay, so and as we do this, I want to create audio tracks. So let's start our queue export. Okay, so, and I did a mono down mix accidentally, but we'll see if this should just be drums. When we play. And when I do this, this is going to be bass and drums. And this will be all of the file. So once you have, so if you send them like two different premix groups, then in the batch export, once you do your audio mix down, you can make your TV mix, but you could say, okay, I want these instruments in this group, not in this group. So basically everything is routed to your premix group. And then when you do multiple, you could just select that one particular export. And once you export it, you could just say, and again, all those can be saved as presets. You probably don't want it to be a mono down mix. I'll say interleaved, and we'll do this one more time. So we'll just take, so all three of these will now be rendered as audio tracks. So we could see that, you know, we could just have those automatically done. So yeah, you could do it. So once you have it set up once, so kind of set up like pre-master groups. Once you have that done once, then you can save it as a preset and store it within your template to immediately recall it for you. Okay, so we see from Word to RG says, okay, so one can paint in to the grid division. Thanks. Yep, so you can do it in the pattern editor, as Jazzy mentioned, but if you want to do it in the key editor, you could just simply do it there as well, especially if you have existing parts that are in a key editor. Okay. So you just see Michael Team's comment. So I think I got Wilfried's email. I'll pass it on to Michael Teams after the live stream. But Michael, if you want to send me a brain cramp email reminder, since it is Friday afternoon and last day of school for my son, just so I remember to forward Wilfried's email over. All right. All right, so you see Delcer Music says, thanks for answering all my questions, Greg. You're the best. Can you show how to get the best out of Frequency 2 plugin? All right, so let's say, I'll just stop this real quick, or I'll revert it. All right, so Frequency is going to be just kind of like a wonderful EQ plugin. So it's very surgical in a lot of ways. All right, so let's say I want to come over here. Let's take this mix. All right, so switch over to my control room here. All right, so when we want to do frequency is going to be so we'll open up under the EQs. Now, one of the things you could do with frequency in 15 is to actually come over here. A lot of people felt that they couldn't get a lot out of it because of like, oh, it's too small. So you could actually come over here and do user interface scaling. So this is what the default frequency is. But if you wanted to scale the user interface, you could do this with Steinberg plugins. So if you want it to be like Mr. Magoo size, it's great for my eyes. So now when we do this, we have 8 bands of EQ. Now these bands can be different types of EQ. So if we wanted to be a cut, so we go up to 96 dB of cut, we could do a low shelf, a peak, and we could think of that as being parametric, a high shelf, and a notch. So let's say, okay, we want to do, let's say I want to take band 1 here and I want to do like a 6 dB cut. So I will bring this, so we kind of have a very gradual slope. So let's say I want 12 dB, 24, or again up to 96 dB. So if you really want to kill low frequencies in the mix, so you have your different cuts there. We could also just come over and say, now if we wanted to do a low shelf EQ, so now as I boost the EQ, so let's add more gain, we could just kind of like a shelf, take our low frequencies, and again, we could adjust kind of the Q of that. So if we wanted to just cut based on the shelf, so you could do that and change kind of the frequency which the shelf kicks in. So peak will be parametric. And with parametric EQs, when we come over and we adjust the frequency, we could adjust so how much of the width. So if we want it to be broad or narrow. Now let's say we want it to be super narrow, that's when we could do a notch. So a notch can get to be more narrow. And if we wanted to invert, so sometimes if you have a frequency that's annoying, so let's say if I wanted to come here and this, you kind of accentuate the frequency that's annoying you, and then you can cut. But you could also, I think, just come over here. So you could very easily kind of cut. Now, one of the cool things is if you come over here, you could click on this little speaker. And this is, as you adjust the EQ, it's only previewing what is being affected by that frequency. So I could hear exactly what changes are happening with that EQ. And as we do this, we could actually just see like what the key So we see as we move to frequency what the actual key is going on. So let's say I know the song I think is in the key of A. So I want to accentuate the frequencies around the key of A. Now you could also just in the frequencies, if you don't know what frequency that is, you can say, okay, let's go to A4. And you could just come over here and just type in the different frequency bands. So let's say we're on frequency 5, so I could come over here and say, okay, let's get to A6. And that will take you to that particular frequency. Okay, maybe A4. So if you wanted to EQ based on the musical context of the song, each one of the bands can also be linear phase. So if you click on linear phase here, you could do that. We have a dynamic EQ section. So once we enable dynamic EQ, we can now come over here and switch. And we could now say, okay, you know, frequencies on this track that are right here are actually, we want those to be compressed. If we click over here, we could say, okay, we want to view it as kind of like the full channel controls. So we can say, okay, we want this, we have our EQ, we could activate the dynamics, and we could also activate sidechain. So if you want it to be an internal sidechain, or if you want another source that's feeding into the sidechain, you have each band has its own unique sidechain input. So if you put this on the mix, you know, or let's say you put it on a group and the guitars are, you know, interfering with the background vocals, anytime the guitars come in, the background vocals could do compression on a guitar. So, you know, and if you get like different, like, you know, resonance suppressor EQ plugins, this is in essence kind of what they're doing. Now, as we've looked at all of our EQ bands, let's say I'm adjusting, if I'm on a stereo track, I'm adjusting the stereo frequencies, but we could also just come right over here and say, okay, maybe I want to do the mid and side. So when I come to, let's say, EQ3, I could EQ kind of like if I wanted the outside edges of the stereo fields, like the left and right, to be brighter, but I wanted to dip where the particular EQ for the frequencies for the vocal. I can now come over here, and even if we're on EQ3, I could just switch and say, okay, when I'm on the side, I could have a different EQ. I could have completely different Q settings. So let me just turn that off. And as we come over here, we could have our different Q settings for the middle. So let's say, okay, I want to adjust the gain. And so I can have a narrow Q for my mid, but a broad Q for the side, even though it's still the same band, the same EQ band. So I could do my mid side. So if you wanted to EQ the vocals but not affect the EQ on other tracks that are panned, or if you wanted to also do this for left and right channels independently. So if you want to EQ the right side of a particular instrument differently than the left side, for instance, piano, maybe you want the left side, the bass frequencies to be EQ'd separately than the upper register of the higher keys, you could have left-right EQ. So once you start kind of playing around with this, you know, you realize that it's pretty special EQ. You could adjust like the metering, so all sorts of great stuff that you could kind of work with directly there with frequency. So let me know if that's helpful. All right, wonderful to see Randy Lee Music on from Texas. Thanks for joining us. All right, we see Gareth joining from Bilbao, Spain. Thanks for being on with us. And he's received 1 gallon of almond praline ice cream for him and Lola, his daughter. All right. All right, so we see from Cheeseboard says, thanks very much for taking the time to answer my export question, updating my template now. All right, so we see Gareth says, new song needs bass. So I have some free time, so if you want to send a track over for me to play bass, be happy to knock it out for you guys. All right, we see Jay joining from Secret Studios. Jazz Dude just says, Cubase stock plugins are the best. All right, so we see Beverly just saying, Greg, thanks for the overview of the frequency EQ plugin. Didn't know how in depth it was. I'll try that later. Yeah, so it can be very surgical with your approach. So, and kind of how it handles the side chaining for really complex tasks is also really slick. All right, so I think we don't have any other questions that were mailed in. Let me just check. All right, I think we're good on that. We'll see if we have more questions come in. You realize it's kind of start of summer. Lots of people are starting vacations and stuff. Give it another 30 seconds or more, see if we have more questions that come up. Thank everyone for all the great questions that they've had so far today. And if you've learned a new tip or trick, make sure you hit the like button. See Jazz Dude sharing just a link, a new video series, probably of stock plugins. All right, we see Sable Winters wishing everyone a great weekend. My son is just finished all of his 7th grade exams today, so he's looking forward to a relaxing weekend. One more day of kind of fun school for him, and he's out for the summer. He's looking forward to it. To see Uno Memento, just saying see you. All right. And once again, if you're new to the live streams, we do this on Tuesdays and Fridays starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. And we'll go for until we run out of questions or 4 hours, whichever comes first. All right, see Beverly wishing everyone a great weekend. All right, so I guess we are out of questions. We see Jazz Dude just posted some new Iconica Opus and Iconica Sketch templates with all of the attack compensations done. All right, so we have another question from Soul Sound Official. How to lock waveform zoom and save settings across all Cubase, or it can be saved differently for each project. So if it's kind of like when we come over here, we have kind of the waveform zoom here. There's also kind of the amplitude. So let's say I'll just hide the lower zone here. So if we had like low level amplitude material, we could zoom kind of the audio waveform here as well. So we could just do that. With this, I think, let's see if we just come over here. We could say I think we could save like different zoom presets here. So let's say if you want like horizontal zoom presets, you could add. And if we wanted vertical zoom presets, we could also add here. So let's say, so we have our divide track list. So, but yeah, so you could add different zoom presets that could be called up. So like if I wanted to only see 4 tracks or 8 tracks at a time, you could do this. Or you could say, I want to zoom n tracks, and that means that you could just type in, I want to see 10 tracks, and you could just kind of type in to see how many tracks that you want to see. All right, so you see Tim K saying his cat Buddy insists his attacks cannot be compensated for. Uno Memento asks, are there any new updates or features coming to OmniVocal soon? So I haven't heard of the time frame for it. I'm sure that that's kind of done by Yamaha. It's not like done in-house at Steinberg, so sometimes I don't get the information since it's kind of done by Yamaha in Japan. But I'll see if I may have some meetings next week with some people in Germany to see if I can get more information. All right, so we see John Barry says he downloaded the Opus template. Yeah, let me know if there's anything in there that's weird, but it should have all the attack compensations for you that you requested, so I did it for you, John. So hopefully everyone can benefit from that. All right, we'll give it another minute, see if anyone else has questions. All right, so you see Roland stuff. It's got a dash. Okay, so I think we are out of questions. I want to go ahead and wish everyone a wonderful weekend if you're in the northern hemisphere, and hope you have wonderful weather for kind of the start of summer. Everyone, please stay safe and healthy, and we will be back on Tuesday starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern. You could always send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. And with that, we will go ahead and wrap up. Thanks so much for attending. Let your friends know, tell other people about the live streams, and we will see everyone back live on Tuesday. Thank you so much. Goodbye.